Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Black, and I'm one of the Rogue Women writers. We're a group of 9 thriller writers whose backgrounds range from intelligence officers to cops to psychotherapists to journalists. To let you know how this is going to go, for you participants in the Zoom room, you will be in the gallery during the reading. We encourage you to introduce yourselves by typing your name in the chat bar. For those of you joining us on Facebook Live, please comment if you'd like to tell the authors anything, and especially if you have a question you'd like to ask. The comments will be monitored and relayed to the authors in real time. The authors will be reading only briefly, so we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. All of the books here discussed tonight should be available through your local bookstore. And please use the hashtags Rogue Reads and Rogue Women Writers as we post about our experiences with these authors. As I said, my name is Lisa Black, and I'm the author of 18 novels featuring forensic specialists, which happen to be my day job. I am based here in Florida, working with my local police department, and I am delighted to be once again emceeing this event. We're going to start with GREGG HURWITZ, is the New York Times #1 best-selling author internationally of 24 thrillers. His novels have won numerous literary awards, graced top 10 lists, have been published in 33 languages. He's also the co-president of International Thriller Writers. GREGG has written screenplays for or sold spec scripts to many of the major studios, written and produced television, comic books, poetry, and academic articles on Shakespeare, taught fiction writing in the USC English department, and helped write the opening ceremonies of the 2022 World Cup. GREGG produced several hundred commercials working against polarization in politics and culture, and he swam with sharks, literally. His new book is Lone Wolf. Once a Black Ops government assassin known as Orphan X, Evan Smoke left the program, went deep underground, and reinvented himself as someone who will go anywhere and risk everything to help the truly desperate who have nowhere else to turn. Since then, Evan has faced down the most powerful people in the world. But right now, the most truly desperate is a little girl who wants him to find her missing dog. This unlikely, tiny job quickly explodes into his biggest mission yet, one that finds him battered between twisted AI technocrat billionaires, a mysterious female assassin, and personal stakes so gut-wrenching he can scarcely make sense of them. Now, Evan's favorite drink is Kaufman Private Collection Luxury Vintage Vodka. He's a man after my own heart, but the kind of vodka I drink is about $13 a liter at the corner store.
A liter.
So it's not as good, but it's much more affordable. But Gregg's favorite drink is Blanton's original single barrel bourbon, and let's pair that with some smokehouse almonds. Your productivity sounds amazing, but it might be explained after I read that you set up your office something like an isolation chamber, with no email, no phone, white noise piped in. Do you still write like that, or?
Look, on a good day, I get in my office and I'm sitting down and I'm at the keyboard and I'm in my story before I check email or text or turn my phone on. Mm-hmm. So yeah, when I'm rough draft writing, that's what I like to do.
I wish I had that kind of discipline. that would really, really be helpful. Okay, now we're going to move on to a multiple award-winning author, Nick Petrie. Lives in Milwaukee with his wife, Margaret. He has worked as a carpenter, remodeling contractor, and building inspector. He also has an MFA. While inspecting houses, he kept running into ex-soldiers who preferred telling their traumatic memories to a stranger, and they inspired him to create Peter Ash. In his new book, The Price You Pay, former soldier Peter Ash is still adjusting to a regular low-key life, though he's found a great job and a great girlfriend. His BFF, Lewis, has helped Peter Ash out of more trouble than Peter cares to remember. So he doesn't hesitate when Lewis asks him to drive into the teeth of a blizzard to find a former associate. There they find blood in the snow and learn that someone has stolen notebooks full of incriminating secrets about Lewis's long-ago crimes. To save Lewis's wife, Peter and his longtime girlfriend June face ruthless and violent foes at each turn, including one who will stop at nothing for revenge. So will Peter and Louis be able to keep that dark past buried, or will they need to step into the darkness to save the people they love most? As for a favorite drink, Nick tells us both Peter and I drink bourbon. Bourbon again. Everybody's on bourbon. The good stuff, neat, like Woodford Reserve's double oaked, or the less good stuff on the rocks or out of the bottle around a campfire. Pretty much anything's good around a campfire. However, Peter's also a big fan of breakfast burritos, and the book actually featured a scene where, after a night of mayhem, Peter makes two and shares one with Louis. See our website for the recipe. Of all the what inspired me to write this series stories I've heard from authors, I think I love yours the most. And how did it come about that a number of your clients were ex-soldiers?
I think it was just time and demographics. This was right after the surge. Which was 2008, 2009. So the housing market was in free fall, but a lot of veterans were coming home with money to put down a down payment. So they were basically getting in at the bottom, and everybody else was sort of staying out. So they were, they were doing well with in terms of the crash. But I'm somebody that people just tell things to. Strangers tell me stories all the time. It's a fine quality to have for a writer, because you learn a whole bunch of stuff. It's a interesting way to think about and develop characters.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, our third author tonight is Amanda Flower, who has over 50 novels published, a former librarian, the dream job of just about all of us. She lives in Northeast Ohio with her husband on their farm. And if you like recipes and adorable cats, check out her blog. Her books have centered around poets, with Emily Dickinson and other famous writers as characters, Amish characters, goats, candy making, and a magical garden in Scotland. In her new book, To Slip the Bonds of Earth, it's December 1903. While Wilburn Orville Wright's flying machine is quite literally taking off in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, with its historic 57-second flight, their sister Catherine is back home in Dayton, Ohio, running the bicycle shop, teaching Latin, and looking after family. Returning home to Dayton, Wilbur and Orville accept a party invitation. Nervous about leaving that as yet unpatented flyer plans unattended, Wilbur decides to bring them to the festivities with him, where they are stolen right out from under his nose. As always, it's Catherine's job to problem solve, and in this case, crime solve. Amanda's favorite drink is lemonade, and she loves to pair it with cheese and crackers. Another favorite of mine, too.
Yes, an easy dinner when you're writing.
Yeah. So do a lot of librarians want to be authors? No, be honest, tell us the truth.
I would say a healthy number, but not all by far. But I would say a good number might have a manuscript or two in their drawer.
Whether they admit it or not.
Right.
Okay. Our own rogue, best-selling and award-winning Isabella Maldonado, wore a gun and a badge in real life before turning to crime writing. A graduate of the FBI National Academy in Quantico and the first Latina to attain the rank of captain in her police department, she retired as the commander of special investigations and forensics. During more than 2 decades on the force, her assignments included hostage negotiator, department spokesperson, and precinct commander. Her books have been translated into 22 languages, and her Nina Guerrera series is being developed by Netflix for a feature film starring Jennifer Lopez. She will soon be co-authoring a series with Jeffrey Deaver. So in Forgotten Kill, FBI Special Agent Daniela Danny Vega was 17 when she served as an eyewitness when her mother murdered her father. 10 years later, she wonders if she got it all wrong. A New York Police Department homicide detective agrees to reopen the case on one condition. Danny must help him find a serial killer who's been operating throughout New York City for the past decade. If anyone can decipher his patterns and his riddles, it's a trained code breaker like Danny. But the killer knows this too. And his next riddle, a victim, is meant just for her. Now, as a Puerto Rican, Danny's natural choice of drink is Bacardi rum. But as an Army Ranger, she's learned to think of MREs as comfort food. So what was the inspiration for Danny Vega?
Well, I wanted to sort of branch out a little bit. I kept thinking that, you know, guys like Jack Reacher were having all the fun, totally, you know, the kick butt men, and you know, other women that I've written, you know, are more along the average. They may have a lot of courage, but physically they're more like a standard situation with some training. So I thought, let's just go over the top. Let's go for it. And I did some research, and I was so excited to find out that there are female Army Rangers. There have not, they only just in 2017, the very first women graduated from both parts of Ranger School and became fully tabbed and scrolled and joined the 75th Ranger Regiment. So it's a relatively new thing, all things considered. But when I did the research, I mean, they changed nothing for these women, and you can see pictures of them going through the O course, and they literally have like a 180-pound man on their shoulders carrying.
Gosh.
It's required. You have to, you know. And the women, I mean, they've shaved their heads. They are completely really strong. I mean, you look at these women and you're like, wow. There aren't very many. I mean, granted, there are just a small handful, but they have done it. And then in 2019, the first female Rangers were deployed in combat. And shortly after that, the first female Ranger who was a captain led a platoon in combat overseas. So, you know, I thought, what if I had someone like that? And then, you know, I also, because I love like codes and riddles and things like that, I thought, well, let's also give her some code breaking. And then I had her leave the Rangers and join the FBI. And there actually are several people who are in different federal agencies who were formerly in special forces of various kinds. So all of this is very plausible, which is always funny when people are like, oh, that would, you know, that would never happen. It's like, well, it actually could. And so I really delved into it, did tons of research, and was so inspired by these women, the small group of women who managed to do it. I just wanted to celebrate one of them.
Very, very cool. Okay, now we're going to go back around and hear from all these new books. So let's go back to Greg, and can you please read us a section of Lone Wolf?
Okay, well, I promised that this story was deeply personal. Orphan X is an assassin who left his assassin's program and now helps people who are only in desperate need, who are being terrorized by other humans and have nowhere else to turn. But this book opens in a very unusual way. He was taken out of a foster home at the age of 12 and trained up to be an assassin. He never knew his parents. And this book opens with him. He's on the end of a dirt road in the middle of nowhere, Texas, standing in front of a prefab, and he has reason to believe that the man who is his biological father is behind the door. And he's sort of gathering himself up to go knock on that door. As much as he's had training to calculate, you know, the wind drift of sniper rounds, to have mixed, you know, hand-to-hand combat, scream and knife fighting, demolition breaching, the one thing he never learned was how to speak the strange language of intimacy, how to engage with other human beings. That's where he doesn't have training. That's where he feels that he lacks courage and has vulnerability. And so I just want to read the scene that opens the book, which is Evan kind of arriving and standing up at this place that I described. Evan stood where the long dirt road gave over to the desolate heat mirage loam, staring at the double-wide manufactured home where the man who was presumably his biological father lived. The man Evan had never laid eyes on, the man he had reason to believe, was currently inside those four dilapidated walls. He had the taste of dirt in his mouth, sun-baked Texas mountain laurel, a taste of land unfamiliar to him, the taste of another kind of life. The taste of poverty was familiar, despite the fact that his own childhood indigence had been of the urban variety. He recognized something here in the cracking cement boards that spoke to drafts, the dimpled roof that let in rain, the pink paint faded to pale nothingness that no one would ever bother to patch. It was the kind of broke that looked right back into you, into your worst parts, and told you that what you saw around you was a precise reflection of just how worthless you were and would always be. The mailbox spoke to drunkenness and disregard, its wooden post snapped by a wayward bumper. The front door was shut against the sandpaper wind. A black trash bag that had replaced a window pane thrashed back and forth and then fell still in the heavy Texas heat. Blooming in his stomach was the kind of dread he'd nearly forgotten, a dread of private stakes and private consequences, of opening a door that could never again be shut. He stepped up onto the porch, the sagging boards rasping against the soles of his boots. Once he knocked on that door, he could never undo it. He searched for his breath, lost it, found it again. He knocked. A few seconds' delay spoke to surprise that an unannounced visitor would trek to this edge of civilization. And then footsteps approaching. And that's where I pause.
Well, that's agonizing to leave us there. Well, that sounds about as intensely personal practically as you can get. So very, very impressive.
Thank you, Lisa.
Now, you have a BA from Harvard and a master's in Shakespearean tragedy from Oxford, which means you learned British stuff from real British people. So I'm just afraid to talk to you. I'll be upfront about that.
There's no need. We've seen all these institutions of higher education like plummeting to earth, so don't worry. There's nothing intimidating to be had there.
And I am dying to hear about going undercover in a mind control cult.
Yes, well, that's the one thing that when I did, I had to write not as extremely as what the research showed me. If I'd actually written what I witnessed, I don't think my editor would have let it go through because it just wouldn't carry readers across the suspension of disbelief. Mind control culture are just staggering. And I went under and I was kind of pushing everybody. What you want to do is push to see what sort of levels they'll come back at you to argue and to open up different bosses to come claim. But if you get too pushy, then they'll label you as a goat and they'll just remove you because they don't want goats to infect the sheeps. But one of the ones I went to was a lock-in facility, about 250 seats at a big Radisson by LAX, by the airport. And what cults want, we tend to think that they want people who are like unhealthy or from broken families. What they really want are healthy people in times of transition. That's why we see them, recruiting at college campuses, at airports, at bus stops. They want to catch people who have healthy, normal instincts. And it was really drummed home to me because we sat in a giant horseshoe of about 250 chairs. And the person who's the lead kind of cult organizer says, all right, everybody who's ready for change, stand up. And when there's 249 people standing and you're the only one sitting and everyone looks at you, it's an unbelievable amount of social pressure. I mean, we're social animals. And so it calls to mind, I mean, all of us have been at one time at that like kind of mediocre Broadway show that everyone stands up for a standing ovation and you're in the third row and you just stand up because you want to be the only asshole who's still sitting. That's what it feels like all the time, right? They're playing on normal social inclinations that we have to kind of fit in. And so I'll do almost anything in the name of research. I've shot all the guns that Evan gets on. I've snuck on a demolition rangers with Navy SEALs to blow up cars. I've done a lot of really deep analysis and kind of deep diving into the world of AI for the new book. I like seeing where like new technologies interfere with us, with our human ethics, and where those two aspects kind of collide. And so I always like to go out into the field, into the world, and do the kind of research that lets readers have a front row seat to the action. So I can give them that.
That is amazing too, because I'm The book I just finished and I'm working on the final edits with involves a cult. So yes, all that is so familiar to me. There was a question in the chat that you answered, but I think I'll read it for everyone, all your other fans out there in Facebook land or wherever, YouTube. He was surprised to see Mia and Peter missing from Lone Wolf and wondering if they'll be back. And
yeah, and they will certainly be back. So Evan Smoke, my main character, is Orphan X, who's an assassin. He chooses to live and hide among ordinary people, and that's sort of that's one of the key themes of the series. When he's an assassin at the age of 12, when he's taken out of a foster home and trained to be an assassin, his handler and father figure tells him the hard part won't be making you a killer. The hard part is keeping you human. So he's always had this pilot light of his humanity is always flickering, and he's kind of trying to protect it. So he hides among ordinary people, and he lives in like a penthouse apartment in the Wilshire corridor here in LA, where I live. And downstairs from him is a single mother district attorney named Mia. Her son's an 8-year-old named Peter, and Mia and him have crazy chemistry between them. But if she ever really knew who he was, she'd have to arrest him. So it's this very like sort of awkward, will they, won't they relationship. And so they had a sort of conflagration in the last book, and they're taking some space in this book, but there will be a return. And the return collision, I think, will be a lot more powerful than what we've seen between them in the past.
Okay. And tell us about the Paramount series option with producer Scott Frank.
Yeah, so I have 8 books or so that are standalone Hitchcock everyman thrillers, and I set them up with one of my favorite screenwriters who does adaptations is a screenwriter named Scott Breck. He did Dead Again. He did Minority Report. Funky Dick. Yeah. He did Walk Among the Tombstones. It's Larry Block. He did Get Shorty and Out of Sight, which was Elmore Leonard. And he also wrote Godless, a short story in The Queen's Gambit, which is spectacular. And his new series is Monsieur Spade, which is Raymond Chandler set in present tense, not in present, I'm sorry, set like 20 years after he retires to the south of France. He's wonderful at adaptations. And Queen's Gambit is one of my favorite limited series ever. I mean, I think that and probably Chernobyl, I think, are just perfect. And so I had these 8 books, and Scott and I had a long talk. We had sort of a friendly talk, and we were like, we should do something together. And so basically what we're going to do is take these 8 books and produce them, find younger screenwriters and directors from different backgrounds or people who've been blocked out of Hollywood, and we'll sort of oversee them through the rewrite and foster these projects along and help these younger screenwriters or directors break in and sort of use my books as the sourdough starter for the movies that come, with both of us helping them along the way.
Very, very cool. Well, I'd love to talk about that some more, but let's go on to Nick, because everyone is dying to hear part of the price you pay.
All right, so this is actually the chapter 1, page 1, really, not quite page 1, because books don't really start on page 1, but you gave such a nice setup, Lisa. So this is sort of the slow version of your setup. Peter Ash opened his eyes in the dark, listening. Some sound had pulled him from sleep. It wasn't one of the normal noises of the old house. His subconscious mind was used to the wintry clank of the radiators, the wind's rattle of the loose window pane. This was something different. Peter often woke in the night, pillow wet with sweat, mind racing. The war returned in his dreams. He'd come to terms with it, mostly. He would turn to see June Cassidy snoring softly beside him and think of the life he was making with her every day. Sometimes that was enough. Other times his chest was so tight he could barely breathe. So he'd get up and pace the unlit house, heart pounding, skin flushed and damp, fighting to pull air into his lungs. He'd feel the desert sun baking his skin, see the faces of friends who had died or many had killed. He'd smell the stench of unburied bodies. Breath after breath, he let it all come, the cost of war. But Peter wasn't sweating now. He felt cool and alert, his senses searching the night. He glanced at the clock on the nightstand. It was 3:45. Then came a soft clink like metal on stone. someone downstairs. Slowly and carefully, not wanting to wake June, he eased himself out of bed, took a Browning pistol from the nightstand, and threaded a cylindrical suppressor onto the barrel. No reason to wake the neighbors if this gets ugly. Gun in hand, he stepped into a pair of raggedy blue boxers, then walked barefoot toward the stairs, the night air cold against his bare skin. As he crept down the steps, he stayed tight against the wall where the treads wouldn't squeak. His scalp tingled and his heart thumped in his chest. The Browning's safety was already off. He heard the sound of running water from the back of the house. He ghosted down the long hall toward the dim electric glow of the kitchen stove, the faint rumble of a drawer closing softly. He rounded the corner with the Browning up and his finger on the trigger. A shadow stood staring into the open upper cabinets. His starched white shirt glowed against his dark skin. Peter had been utterly soundless, but Lewis spoke without looking at him. "Where's your big thermos at?" On the counter, the coffee maker gurgled and began to drip. Peter lowered the Browning, felt his heartbeat slow. "I thought you were in Detroit." "Left early." Lewis's voice was slippery and dark, like motor oil. "Big thermos?" Peter put the pistol on safe and set it on the counter, above the coffee maker, top shelf. Outside, the white windows on the back of the house, the forested ravine shone white with moonlit snow. Lewis found the dented green Stanley thermos and placed it in the sink. His movements were quick and clean, his sleeves rolled exactly twice, his polished black combat boots silent on the slate floor. "You busy today?" Peter was in the middle of a gut remodel on the expensive side of the river. The electrician was starting the rewire at 7 a.m. The plumbing inspector was due before lunch. But whenever Peter had needed Lewis in the past, he had always shown up, no questions asked. So Peter just smiled. "I'm all yours. What's up?" "Take a ride with me," Lewis said. "Should be back tonight." Peter nodded and picked up the Browning. "Let me get some clothes on." He was waiting for Lewis to look him up and down, make some crack about Peter in his underwear, but it never came. "Dress warm," Lewis said. "Leave the phone. Bring the gun."
Not leave the gun, take the cannoli?
No, it's you can riff a little. It's fun. It's you know what do they
Yeah.
say that the professional artists don't borrow, they steal.
That's very cool. I'm not sure how I'd react, and if I found somebody making coffee in my kitchen in the middle of the night, even if it was someone I knew well, I'd be like, "What?" But that sounds a lot more exciting than one time when my brother-in-law showed up at our house in the middle of the day and told my husband, "Need you to come with me. You'll be gone about 4 hours." Okay. Actually, he'd shot a deer and he needed my husband's help, and he needed his truck to get it back because it was that big. So nothing as exciting as I'm sure what's going to happen with Peter and Lewis.
You sure it was a deer, Lisa?
Yeah. No, not actually. I never actually saw said deer, so could be. So you were just in my neck of the woods, Fort Myers, for the Southwest Florida Reading Festival. And I'm sorry I didn't get to see you there. We were at our annual Bacchanal in Key West. But you've been bouncing all over the country for this new release. What do you like best and worst about meeting readers? I mean, you said people just talk to you, so.
Well, that's my favorite part. I spend most of my day, most of my year alone in my office, staring at a screen and basically talking to myself. So it's really great to get out into the world and talk to people who actually read the stuff that I write, and who kind of have the same, value the same thing I do, right, which is books. And so that can be, librarians, booksellers, readers of all stripes. So that's my favorite part. I mean, those are my people. The fringe benefit is getting to someplace like the Southwest Florida Reading Festival or the Tucson Festival of Books, where I just got back from last weekend. Meeting writers I haven't met before, and discovering, we always think this is sort of a small community, but there are so many folks I haven't met and so many folks I haven't read. So to get to kind of make those connections and to see people I've known for years and years is wonderful. The worst part, honestly, is the travel. I am not of a sufficient elevation that they fly me first class. So I am generally, smushed into a small seat like everybody else. And the last couple of trips I did, I was up at 4:30 to make my flight. And I'm not a great sleeper to begin with, so that's always sort of challenging. But it's I always get fired up. I always come home kind of energized to sort of get back to my whatever story I'm telling.
True. Well, you like to actually, speaking of traveling, you like to actually go to any place that you're going to write about. So what's on your bucket list to go visit? And will you be sending a book there just to write it off, or, you know?
Well, my personal philosophy is that I can write off a trip even if I don't write a book about it, because I might write a book about it. So that's my personal philosophy.
Okay. I'll tell the IRS that when I do my tax.
It's interesting finding these are peripatetic books, right? There are 8 books in this Peter Ash series, and they are set in 7 different places. And so part of the sort of the conceit is that Peter is not really stuck in one place. So there's always a reason for him to go somewhere. He's helping a friend of a friend, or he's just on his way, he's on his way through Nebraska, and he happens upon an extremely pregnant young woman whose husband is not a good man. But for me, but what's fun about it is that place can really serve as a character. Yeah. And it lets you add another character and a whole different kind of tone or flavor, right? If I was writing a book set in Miami, which is kind of one of the things that is on my maybe list, or versus setting a book in, Santa Fe, New Mexico, right? So those are inherently going to be different books. A location suggests, storylines, themes, all that kind of stuff. So those are kind of the 2 places I'm thinking about. But, sometimes they just sort of jump out at me. My son, who's now 23, when he was 16, he somehow talked me into taking him backpacking in Iceland. And I was in the airport on the way home when an entire book showed up in my head, which has never happened before. And I had about 20 minutes of clarity, and I just scribbled as fast as I could. And then it disappeared again, and I was left to reconstruct a book from 20 pages I could barely read. But sometimes books just sort of land on you like that.
So we all need to go backpacking in Iceland, is what it sounds like.
Only if you want to write a book about Iceland.
Oh, and you're a complete pantser, you say, and I'm a diehard plotter, but currently my book is this current one is kind of turning into being a pantser, which I find completely terrifying. So if you don't have the whole book show up, in your head coming back from Iceland, how do you get over the fear of, do you ever have this fear of just not being able to do it, or getting stuck, or anything like that?
Absolutely. That fear never leaves me. That I'm 4 or 5 days from sending in the manuscript of a new book to my editor, and I'm kind of terrified, just because I'm doing something a little different. Nobody else really looks at it. My wife has seen the first 30 or 40 pages, but to me that's just sort of kind of how it works. I've tried to write from an outline, and the minute I sort of figure out what the book is about, I lose interest. So it doesn't, I would love to be an outliner. I would think you could work more quickly and more coherently, and you wouldn't in theory throw out as much stuff as I do. But so I just begin with a premise, right? So the piece I just read is the beginning of The Price You Pay, and what I knew was that this was going to be a book about Lewis. This is people have been asking for a Lewis book since the very beginning. So I knew it was going to let me turn the tables, and instead of Lewis coming to help Peter, Peter would come to help Lewis. And I sort of had the idea of how it would start, as one of Lewis's old crew gets in trouble, but I didn't really know about, kind of what the nature of that trouble was, or sort of how the story would expand, or what would happen after that. I just sort of, start walking, and I see what shows up. There's a great quote from E.L. Doctorow that writing a novel is like driving a car at night. You can only see as far as the headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. Right. And I have that quote up on my wall, and it gives me great solace from time to time. Yeah. Yes.
It makes complete sense. You're probably embodying right now what a lot of authors try to describe, in that you're promoting one book, you're probably doing copy edits on whatever you wrote after The Price You Pay, and you're writing the book that's going to come after that. So it's like you have to think in 3 books constantly. It's yeah.
Yeah,
That's a tough part.
it's an interesting balance. And it's, you know, before I got published, it never occurred to me how much of my time would be spent, you know, promoting my stuff, right? And having to sort of think about it in these different sort of compartments. But it's a very real part of sort of the writer's life these days.
It is, definitely. Okay, well, let's hear from Amanda. And because we'd all love to hear part of To Slip the Bonds of Earth.
So just for a little bit of background, Catherine Wright was the real life younger sister of Orville and Wilbur Wright, and she was the silent third partner in their success. While they were in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, flying, she was back in Dayton, Ohio, running the bicycle shop, and they were very much Midwestern, pull yourself up from your bootstraps kind of guys. So they refused to take money from the Smithsonian or any other organization to fly. So the bicycle shop had to be successful because that's how they funded all of their construction of their flyers. So it was very important that she took care of all that stuff back home. And then later on, she goes with them when they sell their planes to the French and German government and teaches herself foreign languages to negotiate contracts and stuff. She's an amazing person. So if you ever have a chance to learn more about her, you know, of course, read my books, but also there's some good history books you can get too. So where I'm starting to read is when she's the one that receives the telegram from Orville that says that they flew for the first time. I made my way home to number 7 Hawthorne Street. The White House with green shutters came into view. I noted that some of the greenery and red bows I had wrapped around the posts on the wide front porch had come loose. I would need to fix those before I entered the house. Ever since my mother died when I was 15, I had been determined to keep the home nice for my father and brothers. That went both for the inside and the outside. Everything had to be just so. I stepped onto the wide porch and sat my satchel on the white rocker, but before I could even pick up the first bow, the front door flew open. "Miss Wright, you're home," exclaimed Carrie Kaler, our 17-year-old maid. She wore her dark hair in a bun at the back of her head, and her attire consisted of a simple gray dress with a white apron. Her hazel eyes were the size of dinner plates. "Carrie, what's wrong? Is father all right?" Fear clawed at my chest. Had my father fallen ill? "I'm fine," my father said in his booming bishop voice. He stood in the foyer holding a telegram. He kept looking down at it. A new fear overtook me. Had something happened to my brothers? Are the boys all right? He handed the Western Union telegram to me. What I read took my breath away. "Success. 4 flights Thursday morning, all against 21-mile wind. Start from level, engine power alone. Average speed through air 31 miles. Longest 57 seconds. Inform press. Home Christmas. Orville Wright." The paper fell from my hands. It seems like everything in the world was about to change.
That's very fun, because it must
you.
have been so tremendously exciting for their family to hear that news and everybody to hear that news. So you're obviously really into poetry, because I could recognize right away that the title comes from the poem High Flight by John McGee Jr., one of the few I can recite from memory. It's also very short to be, you know. Casey at the Bat is another. But what was the first poem you memorized as a kid? What prompted you into poetry?
Yeah, so the first poem I memorized was I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died by Emily Dickinson. And which kind of led me into writing that series, the first book being Because I Could Not Stop for Death, which was a a Mary Higgins Clark finalist and the Agatha Award winner last year. So the second book is called I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died, which came out this previous fall because I really wanted to use the poem that kind of got me on this path as one of the book titles. And luckily, Emily has a lot of poetry in reference to death and with the word I in it. So it's the next book that'll come out next winter in 2025 is called I Died for Beauty, which is another Dickinson death first line. She has plenty for me to work with, thankfully.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
I tried to, when I first started writing, I tried to make all my titles. My first book was called The Silken Sad Uncertain because I was going to have all the titles come from The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, except that the story had absolutely nothing to do with The Raven or Edgar Allan Poe. So, they made me change that. So, which was probably wise.
Yeah.
But it really would have been cool. And we are from the same area, Northern Ohio. My family went on vacation in Catawba Island every summer.
Fun.
Ohio doesn't really get a lot of respect. Well, Cleveland definitely doesn't get a lot of respect, but
Right.
Ohio doesn't really either. Do you feel kind of obligated to be a brand ambassador for the state? Because I do.
Yeah, I do. I love Ohio. It I think it's a good mix of city and rural life. Like you said, I have a farm, but I literally am 20 minutes from downtown Akron, which is, 40 minutes from Cleveland. So it's very easy to get to all of, Playhouse Square and all these, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and all these like really amazing cultural places. But then at the same time, it's super easy to just go out on a trail in the national park or something like that. So, yeah, I love Ohio. Of my books, like the majority of them are set in Ohio. And I was writing, the Emily Dickinson series did so well that they asked me, we want to do another historic woman. And I was looking for specifically a woman in Ohio that has been kind of lost to history, that could kind of showcase, what our state has contributed to the world. And Catherine Wright came up, and she is just the perfect fit. And I'm so excited to share her. And she's such an amazing woman. She was a leader in the suffragette movement. She got her dad and Orville involved in the suffragette movement. By that time, Wilbur had passed away. But I mean, there's just like so much material there. And, for a writer, what's really amazing is all of the family letters have been digitized by the Library of Congress.
Cool.
So I can just, and I can see her handwriting with a transcript, in type form because, obviously reading someone's handwriting is very difficult at times. So I just feel so lucky, like a wealth of knowledge to use, and of course have a murderer because that's what I do.
That is fun. So I have to ask you and your husband have a recording studio? What do you record?
My husband records music for mostly like local bands. He's mastered music for mostly like Christian contemporary, like Jars of Clay and things like that. So he's a recording engineer. And yeah, when I met him, he took me out, I write murder mysteries, and he's like, meet me at these coordinates with this, longitude and latitude situation. And I had only been dating him a few weeks. He's like, I bought this, a former empty field, a farm. And he's like, I'm gonna build a recording studio here. And I was like, first of all, I don't think I should meet you here. He used to play football. He's 6'5" and almost 300 pounds. I went,
you're a serial killer.
I write about this stuff for a living, that people get killed in these situations. And yeah, so we built it through the pandemic, which was an adventure, and we did a lot of it ourselves, like the drywall and everything. I will never drywall again, ever, 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 ever.
That's how I feel about wallpaper. Yeah.
I'm slightly scarred of mudding, to be honest.
Okay, well, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear from our fourth author, our own rogue, Isabella. Let's hear part of A Forgotten Kill.
Ah, okay. Lovely. I had everything all queued up and it disappeared off my screen. So that's okay though, I have a book handy. See, backups. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Live and die with backups. Something law enforcement has taught me to do. As a matter of fact, speaking of law enforcement, one of the things that, well, from this part that I'm going to read, an editor told me a long time ago that one of the things, and I love this, that I need to do as a writer is, especially writing, police procedurals and thrillers and stuff where there's murders and whatnot. A lot of crime authors will write about these things, but I've actually done it. And so therefore I really need to lean into what does it feel like? What does it really feel like? I don't have to just imagine it. So I try to do that. And I also try to kind of honor my brothers and sisters in uniform and the pain and struggle that they go through. And it's very real. Police have a notoriously high divorce rate, high alcoholism rate, high PTSD rate, high depression rate, you name it. It's not really something if you want to if you want to have a carefree life, it's not the career to go into. And so I want to honor that because it really is a sacrifice to do this job. So I'm choosing a scene, and it's well into the book. See, it's deeply into the book. But I'm picking this one because what's going on in the beginning of the book, my heroine, Danny, she wants to find out what happened to her father. Her father was killed, was murdered, and she began to have questions about how he was murdered. So and this was in New York City, so she went to, she's in the FBI, so she got a hold of the NYPD detective who had the case. And she basically went to him and said, I'd like to see the files from 10 years ago when my father was murdered. And he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm really busy with right now. And if you help me on all of these outstanding cases I have, and I think that these three may be related, then I'll give you my file. So it's kind of like they had to strike a deal because this New York City detective is totally overworked. And, and she had sympathy for it. So she's like, you know what? I will help you. And the reason he wanted her help is because she's been trained in pattern analysis and he thought the cases might be related. So what's happened right now in the scene I'm getting ready to read is that she just thinks that she figured out who the killer was behind all of the detectives' cases. And he's going to get off on a technicality. And she just got out of an interview with him. And it is driving her completely crazy because he's going to get off on a technicality. And this is something too that I wanted to talk about, having been through this myself. So this is this scene. Danny leaned her forehead against the smooth wall of the hallway outside the interview room, trying to get her blood pressure down. If she didn't think of a way to outmaneuver him, he would be a free man within hours. I was watching in the observation room, a voice said from behind her. I'm shocked you didn't knock out that arrogant prick's teeth. She turned to see Detective Chapman's sympathetic smile. That would only raise the dollar amount on his lawsuit, she said, and he'd still get away with murder, literally. Chapman grew serious. You hide it well, but I'm a trained observer. I can see how much this investigation is affecting you. Don't make my mistake. His voice sounded strained. There are ghosts that follow me around, ghosts of every victim who hasn't gotten justice. That includes the unsolved cases, the ones where there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute, but I know damn well who did it. He rested a fatherly hand on her shoulder. Let it go, Danny. If you don't, it'll eat you up inside. He spoke with the conviction of bitter experience. Faced with his total honesty, she opened up. This man is a monster. He's compulsive. He'll never stop. More people will die. She forced out the toughest words. words that had lodged in her throat. And it's on me. If I could have, no, Chapman frowned at her. Don't you dare take this on yourself. He lifted his hand from her shoulder to tap his chest. I'm the one who should have seen the pattern years ago. You made the connection, not me. How many people would still be alive if I'd picked up on it as fast as you did? He wasn't being fair to himself. He hadn't been trained in pattern recognition the way she had. She understood that he was talking about inappropriate guilt, and she appreciated him for baring his soul to do it. I've decided it's time to retire, he said, then added, my hunting days are over. At first, she wasn't sure what he meant. Then she recalled the Hemingway quote on a poster in the Bronx Homicide Squad. Quote, there is no hunting like the hunting of man, and those who have hunted armed men long enough and liked it never care for anything else thereafter, unquote. She couldn't picture him relaxing on a beach. Retirement would not come easily for Chapman, who, whether he admitted it to himself or not, was the job. He'd devoted his entire life to seeking justice, a goal she shared. Would decades working in the constraints of a system that often seemed arbitrary take the same toll on her years from now? He dug into his pocket and pulled something out. We had a deal. He opened his hand to reveal a flash drive resting on his palm. You held up your end of the bargain and then some. Not only did you tell me whether the first 3 cases were linked, but you solved them, and a whole lot more. Her heart began to pound. The case files for my father's death are on this drive, aren't they? He'd chosen the only thing that might distract her from spiraling into a toxic combination of guilt and remorse, and she knew it had been intentional on his part. In military terms, she had received a new mission, one that would demand her attention. I've been carrying this around since you first came to the Bronx Homicide Squad, he said quietly. Knew I'd give it to you sometime, but couldn't find the right moment. He took her hand and placed the drive into it. Nothing can bring back your father, but you and your family deserve answers. He paused. I don't expect anything will change, but at least you'll know all the facts.
Very interesting. A lot going on in that scene.
Yeah.
So how did you get interested in code breaking? And is pattern analysis the same as code breaking? And where does one get a job as a code breaker?
Well, it's really not the same thing, but it's a component of it. I just basically got into it. It's kind of a hobby, in the sense of I've just always liked riddles and puzzles, and I mean, it's probably one of the reasons I got into law enforcement. People are a complete mystery to me. So I just have always done it and been interested in it. And so several of the books I've written involve codes, all kinds of different codes. And so to learn about how to do it, there's lots of different jobs you can get involved in. With the FBI, they have an entire cryptanalysis team that do that. The military, they also do have cryptanalysis specialists as well. And it's a large part of intelligence. People think that it's all just computers nowadays, and computers do a lot of it. They do a huge amount of code breaking. But there are still some kinds of codes that require a human mind to do them. And those are the kind that I always put into my books because it's not as much fun. And I deliberately write my books, and I actually stick multiple physical codes in the book. So as you're reading it, if you're inclined, you can try to crack the code. Because I explain what kind it is, and I go through back historical codes and stuff. And if you're inclined, in this one, there's actually a mathematical equation in here that you can try to solve. It's a multifactorial polynomial equation. So good luck.
No thanks.
It took me forever. I'm like hurting my brain because I have to come up with all this stuff. but but if you're inclined, and this one also has other kinds of codes to do too. If you're inclined with my books, you can try to solve the puzzles right along with it. And then if you're not inclined, I do give the answer a couple pages later.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's very cool. So tell us about your new project coming up in the future. You're going to be co-writing with Jeffrey Deaver. How did that come about, and what's the plan for you two?
Yeah, it's really good. As a matter of fact, our first book is already in the can. It is the
Wow.
Ark. The Ark just came out. Literally, I think I have it over here. Anyway, the Ark, I literally just got it yesterday. So yeah, we've actually got the first one written. What happened is a year ago, we were, well, I've known him for a long time. Many of us have known Jeffrey Deaver for a long time. He's been around for such a long time. Everybody loves Jeff,
Yeah.
ITW, huge presence there, always. Grandmaster actually just got that recently. But anyway, so I mean, I've always been a fan, and he actually blurbed one of my books. And I realized reading his books that he and I write very similarly. We have a similar style. And so I just thought, what the heck, let me just do this. And, so I approached him about it. He's never co-authored with anybody. And, at first he's like, yeah, I don't play well with others. I don't co-author, but, we got to talking about it more. And then he's like, you know what? I'll do it with you. Let's do this, because he remembered reading my book that our styles are extremely similar. And you were talking about plotting and pantsing, and he's like a world-renowned plotter.
Yes.
Yes, like so it does make it easier to write together when you kind of know where you're going. But it still requires a lot of back and forth and a lot of changing and stuff like that. I mean, Nick had mentioned throwing stuff out. Jeff and I had to throw stuff out too, even though we kind of knew what we're going to say. You still end up, well, oh, wait a minute, this would be better, and that's not working, whatever. But we just had a ball. It was so much fun. I would recommend it because writing is very much, for many people here, I'm sure listening, are writers, but for those who aren't, you're in your own head by yourself so much of the time. And it is so much fun to have someone else to bounce ideas off of and to get into the story with you and to see how that it goes, because we wanted to do something that was completely unique, and everything is 50-50. This is not something like he had a character and I just wrote it, or it wasn't at all. We literally created the entire story together from start to finish. We invented all new characters, a whole new plot, everything from scratch. So it really is like a completely co-authored 50-50 situation. And it was so much fun to do that. He's brilliant, I do have to say. It's awesome to be working with someone who's so incredibly intelligent.
Very, very cool. Okay, well, unfortunately, we're running out of time here, so let's do one last round robin. Let's see if there's any questions from the audience. Let's go down the line and tell us first. Well, we already heard about some things about plotting and pantsing, but tell us, are you a plotter or a pantser? And tell us what is next for you. What is coming up?
Can I cut in here for a minute?
Yes, absolutely.
There are no questions from the audience, surprisingly. I think they're all stunned, as was I. The readings were incredible. I have two questions, and one of them was spurred by what Greg said about cults, and I find this fascinating. And when you all do research, you must all put yourselves sometimes out there on the line. So it made me wonder if you ever felt, Greg, like you were in danger. Like, did they know you were doing research, or were you really undercover? And if they found out that you were actually trying to worm your way into their cult to figure it out, would you, I mean, when you see cults in thriller novels or on television, they're always spurred to kill people, to your secret. So did you ever feel in danger?
Not during the cult research. I almost got killed in an underground bar in Moscow. That's the closest I've come to getting killed. And I went to banyas in Moscow as well. But with the cults, one of the things I did not do is go in a van and leave the location. I did like a, 6-7 hour lock-in. But if you go in a car, what happens is if you can get control of somebody for 3 days, you can gain control over them. You regulate your sleep. What happens is they put you in a van and they kind of love bomb you. They talk to you in the back. There's not really windows, and you wind up in the hills. And all of a sudden you're up somewhere out of cell phone range, right? They limit your contact to outside communication.
Yep.
And then they have privacy deprivation, which means they go with you everywhere you go. And if that happens, and they'll put like a broken sprinkler by your cabin so you're awake all through the night because it's making noises. They kind of sugar bomb your meals. They start to vacillate, and the cult leader will often pace in hypnotic fashion on stage. There's a sort of hypnotic aspect. Those of you who've seen the film Magnolia with Tom Cruise, remember he plays that sort of inundation. And about 3 days in, sleep deprivation, limited access to outside information, and privacy deprivation, that everywhere you are, you don't have time to think for yourself. And you're sort of love bombed, like they lean in if I act like Greg Colt in all these subtle ways. But if I act like, well, I don't know if this is for me, everybody slowly cues you another way. And we're amazingly social animals. Skinner one time gave a lecture. This might be apocryphal, but B.F. Skinner, who was the father of conditional psychology, he once had a debate with Carl Rogers on stage. Carl Rogers was the very feel-good psychologist. Like, how did that make you feel? In the course of the debate, Skinner conditioned Rogers to blink 5 times more rapidly than the beginning. So as they were having a conversation about which form worked better, Skinner's belief is we're just animals, like reacting to stimuli. And then there's another story, perhaps that's also apocryphal, that when B.F. Skinner was pacing on stage giving a lecture, his students kind of leaned back and were bored when he went to the left, and leaned forward and kind of paid a lot of attention when he went to the right. And he fell off the stage to the right-handed. So there's we can only deal with about 3 pieces of information in our prefrontal cortex, but our visual field, our emotional center, is taking 20,000 pieces of information. So a lot of the decisions that we make aren't occupied in our thinking. They're occupied in our lizard brain reactions, and that's what cults play with. And I just didn't put myself in a circumstance where they could control environment, sleep, and food for 3 days. That's where it really gets scary.
That's so interesting. Okay, so I want to hear everybody else's scary stories about their research that almost got them killed. But before that, Isabella, I want to know, did Jennifer Lopez read your book and want to be your character? Did someone write a screenplay and give it to her and convince her to be your character? How did it feel to find out someone like Jennifer Lopez wants to star as your character? Because that's going to be a hit.
It was an amazing situation. Actually, the book had only been published for like 2 weeks, and Hollywood just started calling. This is the cipher, and it was just it was crazy. I'd never been through anything like this, and there was multiple interest from like 4 different production companies that really all wanted it, and so they all were kind of jockeying, and I was taking phone calls with all of them, and my agents obviously were involved, obviously. But what happened is that I think that her production company is called Nuyorican Productions, and so Nuyorican was in the mix, and I think they knew that they wanted to try to up their game. So at one point they came back during all these different rounds of negotiations, and they said, hey, you know what? We just gave your book to Jennifer and she read it. And not only does she want it, but she wants to star in it. And I was like, what? because I couldn't believe it. But so she actually read the book. I mean, this is long before any kind of screenplay was done, you know, so she read the book, and I was just really blown away. And then she brought in an offer that was just so strong. And I was really in shock because 2 years prior to that, she doesn't know this, but literally I was in Las Vegas in a seat watching her on stage performing. 2 years later, she's reading my book. I'm like, okay, this is nuts. So yeah, surreal.
Well, it's very exciting. Congratulations. So,
Mm.
and
Okay.
go ahead. I think you should take it back, and because we're
No,
way
yeah,
over
I thought
time.
we are, unfortunately. Although I'd love to, see Amanda's cat do some more things. It's very pretty, you know. And so, yeah, let's do one quick round robin of what's next for everybody. Nick, start with you. What are you doing now?
I'm just about to send my first standalone off to my editor, which is a kind of a terrifying moment.
Yeah.
It's set
Yay!
in I know it's set in southwestern Wisconsin in an area called the Driftless region, which is sort of like geographically sort of similar to parts of Appalachia. It's about a guy named Bobby Cruikshank who has been recently released from prison, and he's trying to live life on the straight and narrow when his younger brother is killed in a roadhouse parking lot. It's hard to go on the straight and narrow when you come from a family of criminals, but Paul is the one who got out. The little brother is the one who got out. And so Bobby has to sort of decide if what's he going to do? And is he going to be able to find the person who killed his little brother? And once he does, what will he do then? So there's this, a lot of sort of moral angst involved in this one.
Very interesting. And Amanda, what are you working on?
So, To Slip the Bonds of Earth will come out a week from tomorrow. So have a lot of events for that. My publisher's sending me on like a Southeast US tour. So if you're in the Carolinas, Virginia, definitely check out my website to see where I'll be stopping. In addition to that, I'm still writing the Emily Dickinson mysteries, and the next one, like I said, will come out early next year. And I continue to write cozies. I have a mystery coming out in October called Gingerbread Danger. It's an Amish candy shop mystery. So those are kind of fun to write for me between all the heavy research on these historicals. It's just kind of a nice, just like when people read cozies for like a palate cleanser, it's also for a writer. It feels like that too. So I'm kind of alternating between cozy and historical right now.
Very cool. And Greg, what are you doing?
I am working on the next Orphan X book. Number 10 is going to be absolutely huge. Nothing's going to be the same after the 10th Orphan X book. I think of them as a decology. The whole first 10 books are sort of moving to a point of conflict that's just going to be pretty staggering, and nothing after that's going to be the same as what came before. So I'm really excited about that. I've been kind of neck deep in that one, planning on it for a while. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's
I've also been working on a book about a roadhouse murder that's a standalone that I have to get to Petrie's editor
very quickly. You better hurry up, buddy.
I got to tack out. I got to get it there within the next 24 hours to just beat Nick to the punch. But,
okay.
no, I'm super excited to work on that. And how great to hear Isabella. It's so cool hearing the updates from you. It's been a minute since we caught up, but Nick and all of you, Amanda with your crazy cat, like there's so much cool stuff. I usually have dogs, and my desk's on wheels, as you might see, and my dogs sometimes will fight and grab me. I have a 125-pound Ridgeback, and they'll put their paws on me, and I'll grab the desk, and the whole thing moves across and slams into the wall. So, but really fun being here. So thank you for having me on. I'm
Thank
looking forward to
you.
jumping back into the new one.
Okay.
Yeah, likewise, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
well,
thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
I
And
found it. This is the arc. Yes.
Ooh.
Look
ooh,
at that.
All right.
Wow,
Very,
look at those
very
two big
nice.
fancy names, Jeffrey D.
Yes.
Bella Maldonado. Wow.
So that is what's next for me after the other one comes out, this month.
Great.
So.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Well, thanks to all our viewers and listeners to joining us tonight, and join us next month on April 15th, Tax Day, for a star-studded night with Robert Dugoni, Ann Hillerman, Carter Wilson, and Lisa Gardner.
Wow.
So one more round of thanks for everyone, and good night. Happy reading.
Good night.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Night.
Thanks.